Hello, welcome to another Wine with Tweedy video. I'm going to do a tasting. I brought along another Gavignet to taste today, but I thought I'd actually do a quick bit of chat about appellation in Burgundy, which literally just means names, really, appellation. In particular, because this is from a small AOC called the Hautes-Côtes de Nuits. So perhaps we could spend a few moments to break that down and give a bit of background. Quick crash course in Burgundy regions, the sub-regions of Burgundy. So first of all, the Burgundy is arranged in a fairly sort of slender, tall, thin winemaking region with Dijon at the top. Perhaps I'll try and put on some map graphics. Dijon at the top, and it runs down, and the northern area of the Burgundy wine producing region is called the Côte d'Or, which is the Golden Coast. Now, of course, Burgundy is an inland region of France, and that's not coast in a literal sense, but it is in a sort of geological, historical sense. The Côte d'Or refers to a limestone escarpment, so you can think of it a bit like a range of chalk hills, not dissimilar to the South Downs or the North Downs. But it runs from north to south, starting at Dijon and going down to the River Beaune, is it called? Within the Côte d'Or, which is the sort of the northernmost region of Burgundy, it's then subdivided once again into the northernmost of the northernmost part of that region, which is called the Cote de Nuits, and the southernmost part of that northernmost region, which is called the Côte de Beaune. So we have the Côte d'Or is the topmost part, the long stretch at the top of Burgundy. Within that, the northern part, the Côte de Nuits, slightly below that, the Côte de Beaune. I've always mostly been interested in that northernmost bit, and in the early days I did go back and forth trying a few wines from the Côte de Nuits, the very most northern bit, and a few wines from the Côte de Beaune. And both of those take their names from specific towns and or villages within those regions. So I believe Côte de Nuits has some connection to Nuits Saint-Georges, and Côte de Beaune takes its name from Beaune, which is the sort of the capital of Burgundy in some sense. It's probably the largest town, I believe. Spent some time trying wines from the Côte de Nuits and Côte de Beaune early on. I found quite a difference in style, and opinions clearly vary on this, and I may well have had a sort of a biased sample that led me in one direction or the other, and it may have been other factors, but I found of the two, comparing the Côte de Nuits to the Côte de Beaune, that I much preferred the Côte de Nuits. The style of Burgundy that I'm particularly talking about, red Burgundy here, the style of Burgundy that I like is very elegant, floral, big on the acidity, but not big on the tannins. And that, elegance to me is largely an equation of that. It's about sort of balance and acidity, good acidity, and not being sort of overpowered by these other sort of secondary, tertiary notes like oak from oak barrique, or tannic notes from a very high degree of whole bunch pressing, where the skins and or the stems from the wine grapes have a sort of a woody tannic influence on the wine. So that's never really a style that I particularly liked. And this divide is something that perhaps historically might have been referred to as feminine versus masculine. I personally still think they're useful terms, but a lot of people in the wine industry get upset now if you call a wine feminine versus call a wine masculine. But the styles of wine that I like within Burgundy are elegant, refined, perfumed, quite dainty, quite light. I don't particularly like anything to be too full-bodied, too full of sediment, and not particularly tannic. So I felt like a useful overarching term for all of those descriptors is feminine. You can decide for yourself whether you think that's outdated and irrelevant. But whereas the Côte de Beaune, for me, they generally tended to be wines that are more sort of more muscular, more big, more full-bodied. And it's still the same grape. All red wine in Burgundy is Pinot Noir, but Côte de Beaune was often a slightly more sort of, in my experience, a more kind of muscular, sort of what again might historically have been called masculine style. You can decide for yourself whether you think that term is appropriate or not. Okay, so we have narrowed it down to the Côte de Nuits. This is the area where I think overall, and then there are obviously lots of variables, the particular producer's style, and there are many different vineyards and villages within these regions, and they all have their own variations and differences. But generally speaking, within Burgundy, within the broad umbrella of Burgundy, I think overall I tend to prefer wines from the Cote de Nuits, the northernmost part. So within the Cote de Nuits there are then a number of different villages. Most famous among those is probably Gevrey-Chambertin, which is an absolute favourite of mine. Beaune Romanée is well known for eye-wateringly expensive wines like Domaine de la Romanie Conti, you know, where bottles start at sort of £3,000 plus. And other villages like Nuits Saint-Georges, which is down right on the southern edge. Nuits Saint-Georges is almost bordering with the Cote de Beaune. Well, it is bordering with the Cote de Beaune. Any further south than that, really, and you would be into the Cote de Beaune. So those villages really stood out for me as consistently delivering really good wines, in my opinion, of the sort of style that I like. So the next level up from generic sort of this sort of flat, this baseline of Bourgogne Rouge, red Burgundy, are these broader regions within Burgundy. So some wines can have as their AOC, their Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée. I think we call that a PDO in English, a protected designation of origin. Some wines can be from a broader area which isn't just a single village. So we have things like Cote de Nuits Village, which is from somewhere in the Cote de Nuits, but not within one of the other more specific recognised areas, like, for example, Gevrey-Chambertin or Beaune Romanée or Nuits Saint-Georges. So if it's in one of those more specific areas within Cote de Nuits, it would probably be called that instead. But as a sort of a general a fallback somewhere in between Bourgogne Rouge and a specific named village, you have this these sort of broader regions. So things like Cote de Nuits Village, and also Hautes-Côtes de Nuits is another one that I'm particularly fond of, and that is the subject of today's video, in fact. An example of a wine from the Hautes-Côtes de Nuits, and that's the high coast of Nuits, of nights. So the Hautes-Côtes de Nuits appellation is it's up on the cliffs above, so you can think of most of the vineyards in the Côte d'Or are down at the base of this chalk escarpment that we mentioned earlier. The bit on top of the hill off to the side, and still fairly close to the village of Nuits Saint-Georges, is this sort of broad area that only has a single AOC covering all of it. There are no well-defined villages or even individual vineyards that you can attach a name onto a label with. So anything from that broad area off to the side, up the hill from Nuits Saint-Georges is called Hautes-Côtes de Nuits. Because it's a sort of fairly broad region, it's not quite such a well-known name as, for example, Nuits Saint-Georges or Gevrey-Chambertin. It doesn't attract as sort of high prices. So just, you know, to give you some absolute figures, typically these days, a village level, a wine that is Gevrey-Chambertin, I think you would be very hard put to find it for under £50 a bottle. That's the absolute starting range for Gevrey-Chambertin in this country, in the UK. Beaune Romanée tends to be even slightly more expensive than that. It's a smaller wine producing region, Beaune Romanée, and so much of it is swallowed up by these stratospherically expensive producers like DRC, Domaine de la Romanie Conti. I rarely see anything from Beaune Romanée under sort of £60–70 a bottle, just for the sort of basic village level wines, not a named vineyard within those villages. Nuits Saint-Georges can be a bit cheaper than that, so village level Nuits Saint-Georges wines you should be able to find in the sort of £40 plus range. But again, these are all starting prices, and it can go up much higher than that depending on the producer and so on, and the vintage. Whereas the Hautes-Côtes de Nuits, this particular bottle here, by Burgundy standards, an absolute bargain. I think it's £23.50 currently from Fingal Rock. But generally speaking, even at other wine merchants, it should be possible to find sub £30 bottles of Hautes-Côtes de Nuits. So, you know, if Côte de Nuits is a style that you've tried a few times at some point, you know, if some combination of, say, Gevrey-Chambertin and or Nuits Saint-Georges, and particularly Nuits Saint-Georges, is a style that you've tried at some point, but, you know, the prices of even village level Nuits Saint-Georges are quite off-putting, then the Hautes-Côtes de Nuits offers quite a good alternative, I think, for potentially similar style of wine at much better prices. Anyway, let's open this wine up and see what it's like. So this is from a vineyard owned by Philippe Gavignet called Clos des Dames Huguettes. That's quite a difficult one to pronounce. The vintage is 2019. I have had this a few times before. You could definitely present me with this wine and tell me it's a Nuits Saint-Georges. So it has that sort of beautiful, pure fruit nose, very sort of fresh cherries, lovely smooth mouthfeel. There is a tiny bit of tannic backdrop to that, but certainly not overpowering. It has a nice concentration. There's a little waft of perfume on the nose there, something slightly floral, probably the usual combination of rose and or violet. But it is essentially a predominantly very fruit-driven wine. This is really sort of crammed with those sort of beautiful red fruits that you'd hope to find from Pinot Noir, the cherries and possibly a hint of blackcurrant. And it is lovely. That is, in my opinion, very good Burgundy, and at under £25 a bottle for this particular vintage, 2019, I think a bargain.